So, what's up, everybody? This is your boy Devon Lassine, the Black Anglo-Saxon. I'm here with y'all today to talk about the incentivization structure in America. Why it's a problem, how it's become a problem, and how do we solve for it. But before I go ahead and get started, if you're watching, please subscribe, like, share. Your boy is trying to hack the algorithm. I want to make these conversations top of the mind. So if you want to help me, please do so by doing that. If you disagree with me, even if you agree with me, please leave a comment. I would surely appreciate it. Thank you. So, without further ado, again, today we are talking about the incentivization structures within America and the problems that I see arising and how we can kind of create an environment or a solution to hack, for lack of a better word, the debauchery. I came to want to have this conversation because the other day we had a Ward 8 candidates forum in Ward 8 here in DC. Stephanie Fu, shout out to her. The question came directly from her. She was the moderator. And I thought it was a brilliant question. I think it is the question of the century because I don't think it is basically for this moment in time. I think it transcends time, this moment, as well as just DC, right? And so she asked the candidates, we hear a lot about at-risk returning citizens and the resources that we allocate and receive for them. But what about people who's doing everything they're supposed to? What are you going to do for them, us? The question itself was brilliant. Me personally, I don't feel like anybody particularly answered it, and I don't think they could answer it. As politicians, it's really hard to, especially in this moment in time, I think it takes a different type of person, somebody who I would consider a warrior of sort rather than a politician. Because politicians and people who run for office typically are glorified referees or just highly qualified diplomats. Your job is mostly about finding the middle between all of the stakeholders to create some type of peace, or at least that's what it's become in my lifetime. Unfortunately, they have found themselves trapped within the same incentivization structures that we all experience today. And I think that is what creates a barrier to get policy for everyday people, to Stephanie's question. What happens is you have a group of people who typically would be advocating in a space where they would be, quote unquote, for the people. Unfortunately, I'll get into it in segments of how media has been co-opted, of how all of these things have taken place to create an environment and exploit the bad behaviors, the behaviors that get people attention, and elevate that in a way as to exploit it, right? And so the first thing I'm gonna touch on is the social incentives. And so, for an example, right, what I mean by the social incentives, think of a child, think of a kid, think of when you were growing up, the things that a person would either get reprimanded, scolded, shamed, loved, adored, admired for, right? So we have, and I can only speak for right now in the Black community, but this goes across, like I said, throughout American culture as a whole. But let's take the nerd versus the thug or the rising quote unquote at-risk youth, right? The community, at least where I'm from, unfortunately, has an incentivization structure where if you are that kid who is at risk, you're probably getting more attention from the services industry, and that's from like your school therapist and those people who are going to come in and provide resources so that you don't basically fall off the guardrails. The kid who gets all of the appropriate grades, meeting all of the appropriate marks, gets less attention from the teachers, gets less attention from sometimes parents as well, because people feel like, well, they're doing okay, so they don't require as much. But what we don't realize that happens within that is that you lose people, right? And so that kid who doesn't necessarily get the love or the admiration, or once you get into adolescence, the girls or the guys, they begin to misbehave in certain ways that do get the attention. And it's a trickle down effect, because some people say that, oh, it's just the kids acting out. But in a lot of the ways, it comes from an incentivization structure of the community, of the adults, as well as the peers. Because if you pay attention to a lot of people's households, unfortunately, you have a lot of bad actors, or in some cases, just a gross level of negligence, which is also very problematic. But all of those things reproduce a culture and an incentive structure. So you have school to prison pipeline, because why? And that's on the other side of this conversation, is the monetization of corporations of the degenerate behavior. They are, what's the word? They are pushed in that direction. And not by saying, because a lot of people think that it's like this, oh no, I'm pushing you to go down this road, I'm pushing you to go down this road. Yeah, that happens in some ways, but I think more so than not, it happens in that way where people are grossly indifferent to people who do everything that they're supposed to do, right? And so even when we look at, let's say, for another example, the algorithm of social media, right? What gets traction on social media are redundant conversations that produce another level of layered toxicity for public consumption, as well as our own view of how we now see each other. I think the biggest example of that is probably going to be currently the whole men versus women conversation. And though I understand why the conversation is happening, I don't think people understand, again, in that very passive way, that you're also, by tuning in, by playing into the quote unquote game, you are incentivizing that. It would behoove me, if I wanted to make money or I wanted to be famous really, really quick, I could easily pick one of the popular topics that are going on right now to talk about, because I know it gains traction within our community. I could talk about sports. I could talk about consumerism. I can talk about debauchery behavior, or pick a side on which gender I want to go for in the battle of the bottom to whose fault is it, right? But it gets views. It's incentivized. So we have to live with that. And unfortunately, those are the consequences. But those are some examples of what I mean by the social incentivization structures impact us in a way where it doesn't allow us to create a space for politicos to come in and actually allow themselves to give policy to people who do, for what it's worth, everything that they were supposed to do, right? Because to do that would be on the other side of the conversation is, oh, well, why are you doing that for this group of people? Or what about this group of people? Or what about, because we all know whataboutism. And it's more popular. It's easier for them to get traction because it's politically valuable right now to talk about everybody who is at risk. And again, I'm having this conversation. I'm not saying that people who are at risk, who are returning citizens, don't deserve resources. But what I am saying is that when you don't account for people who are doing everything they're supposed to do, you lose people in the cracks. And with that being said, you create a system of incentives to where people then begin doing things or acting out badly as a result because it doesn't pay to do the right thing. You want to reward people for doing the right thing because without it, you end up in this space where people and more people fall into the bucket of degeneracy. That's all. And I think we should and need to understand that, especially for people who are developing and creating policy, which is all about incentivizing and de-incentivizing behaviors, whether it be from our criminal codes, our tax laws. Everything comes down to how we're going to incentivize people to do what we want or don't want them to do, which I'll get into a little bit later. I got some small little slight examples. But if you're still here with me, go ahead, hit the like button, hit the share button. Again, if you disagree with anything I'm saying, please leave a comment. Please don't leave a comment. Again, I'm trying to hack the algorithm and make these conversations front of mind, because even though you might not necessarily agree with me, I think it is very important that we start having these conversations rather than conversations that provide the level of redundancy that we've been having them for the last 30 years. Okay? All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move to an actual article.